Pirates, I can reject everything. 41-60. 041. I can eat multiple devil fruits. That's right, the concubine is ready to go to the Great Waterway, so I have to tell him. Hancock's beautiful eyes lit up, his extremely perfect face showed an excited look, and he murmured, the concubine must let him know that the one who entered the new world first must be the Igia. Without hesitation, I quickly took out the phone bug and dialed it out. Chris, inside the training room. I reported Chris's strength just now. Leju leaned back on the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, and touched her white chin with her small hand. She smiled and said, my father and the others are all shocked. They never thought that Chris' strength would be so strong. Perona flew in front of Leju, and she liked this gentle big sister very much. Sister Leju, why didn't you say anything just now? I really want to hear how shocked they were. It must be fun, very fun, ha 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 ha. Queen Sweetheart rolled her eyes at her and said angrily, you girl, you know how to play, can you listen to this? People are calling there and you are listening. How can you do this? Betty glanced at Leju and said lightly, Chris trusts you very much. You should understand what to say and what not to say. What are you saying? Leju is so gentle and dignified, how could she possibly do something to hurt us? Besides, these are not top secret matters and can't be reported anywhere. Among these people, she knows the most things. If Chris deliberately concealed it, Reiju wouldn't know too much about it. Anything Reiju could hear was what Chris wanted her to know, that's all. For a partner like Tautu, this is highly confidential. No one can know except Baccarat. Baccarat, Devil Fruits Manual. At this time, Chris stopped practicing and walked over. Hearing his words, all the girls were stunned for a moment, very puzzled. As a person, Chris has never been interested in these things, so why did he suddenly see this thing? Chris, let me ask you weakly, did you find anything? Queen Sweetheart looked at Chris with a curious look on her pretty face. Betty took a breath and affirmed, needless to say, there must be special circumstances. Baccarat took out the devil fruit illustration from the drawer, smiled sweetly, and handed it to Chris. When a person with power eats a devil fruit, he cannot eat a second one. Chris opened the book and explained patiently, I've been working on a problem since I got the fruit of rejection. How to use the ability of repelling fruit to allow yourself to eat 2 devil fruits, or even multiple devil fruits. Now, I have found a way to completely repel the 2 devil fruits, so that they will not conflict, and they are all for my use. Shock. Shocked. The girls were shocked to the extreme by the big news of Chris. The ability person can only eat 1 devil fruit, this is something everyone knows. This is an iron rule, and no one can change it. But now it's better, the man in front of him has actually figured out a way. How can this not shock them? Chris, are you telling the truth? Queen Sweetheart's beautiful eyes widened, a surprised expression appeared on her pretty face, and she said quickly, I know you don't like to joke, but this is too incredible. Betty has always been calm, but she couldn't calm down at this time, and asked, Chris, are you sure you can really succeed? This is not a joke. If you eat 2 devil fruits and fight inside your body, it will explode. Betty looked at Chris and said solemnly, so, I suggest you don't try it. This is really too dangerous and there is no way out. Perona nodded and echoed, it's better not to try such a horrible thing. If it really explodes, it will be very scary. Chris, I know you're not a reckless person, but I suggest reconsider. Leiju looked at Chris with a look of concern in her beautiful eyes, and said in a sweet voice, after all, there has never been an example of eating 2 devil fruits in history. The danger here is simply too great. Baccarat looked at Chris' figure with a sweet smile on his dignified and elegant face, and said something with certainty. Don't worry, it's all right. My gut tells me that Chris can pull it off. Hearing Baccarat's words, all the girls looked at her in unison, completely stunned. Who is Baccarat, the goddess of luck? Since she said so, it also showed a fact. Chris can really eat 2 devil fruits. Since Baccarat said so, it must be fine. Betty shrugged and said something casually. The sweetheart queen nodded with a surprised look on her face, and murmured, "How is this possible? One person can actually eat 2 devil fruits. If people outside know this, it won't cause a stir." Leju touched her delicate chin, and said in a very sure tone, "If it really spreads out, the sea will definitely boil. Don't worry, I won't report this matter, so don't know it." Guys, Chris can eat 2 devil fruits. Do you have any suggestions? Should you choose dark fruit or you demons? You can leave a message in the book review area, and the author will consider it. 042. Hancock is spoiling Chris. Blue blue blue. At this moment, the phone bug on the boulder rang. Chris walked over without hesitation. He knew very well that the only person who could call himself was the most beautiful woman in the world, Hancock. The Queen's sweetheart looked at each other with curiosity in their eyes. Since they got on the boat, the phone bug in the training room has never rang. They didn't say much, and looked at the front carefully, wanting to see who it would be. Coming to the boulder, Chris directly raised the phone bug and officially connected. "Chris, the concubine didn't bother you. The phone bug looks like Hancock, with fluffy hair and a dark red dress. She is indeed the #1 beauty, even if the phone bug imitates it, she is so beautiful. What's the matter? Say it directly." Chris flipped through the devil fruit illustrations, as always calm and indifferent. Seeing the appearance of the phone bug, Perona and the others understood the identity of the person who came. The only woman in the Kobo Sea, Boya, Hancock. Strange, how could she call Chris? Queen Sweetheart looked at the phone bug in front of her, with a puzzled expression on her pretty face. She couldn't understand. Betty took a breath and said lightly, "Don't think about it. Chris left a few days ago, and he must have gone to discuss the alliance." Perona flew around in the air, her face full of envy. "Even the phone bug is so beautiful, so what about me?" Sure enough, the #1 beauty in the world is really too beautiful. Haley. Leju nodded lightly, touched her fair chin, and said in agreement, "Boya, Hancock, but a legendary beauty. It is said that the man who sees her will basically be petrified by her, which is really breathtakingly beautiful. Now that I see this phone bug, I know that the rumors are true." Baccarat looked at Leju, her beautiful eyes blinked, she smiled, and she was generous. "You're right, but Chris is clearly not in that category. Whoever the woman is, in Chris' view, it doesn't make much of a difference." Baccarat turned to look at Chris and said with a sweet smile, "He is a man who wants to achieve a great career. All his energy is devoted to cultivation, and he doesn't care about any women at all." At this time, a pleasant voice came from the phone bug. "Chris, the concubine has begun to set off, and in a short while, you can enter the Great Channel." The phone bug imitated Hancock, folded his hair, and said with a sweet smile, "My concubine will enter the New World earlier than you, and I will be waiting for you in the New World." At this moment, Marigold and Sandersonia looked at each other. It turns out that Chris looks like this. Chris, who was simulated by the phone bug, wore black clothes and black pants, and his face was calm and unsmiling. As for looks, it's really handsome. Coupled with the voice from the other side, the two of them immediately knew Chris' character. Very calm and rational man. Judging from the appearance of the phone bug, the strength of this Chris is indeed very strong. Marigold leaned into Sandersonia's ear and whispered. Sandersonia nodded lightly and said in agreement, "It's impossible to pretend such a strong person's characteristics. He is indeed very strong. My elder sister is right. He really has the strength of a general." At this time, Chris made a sound and said calmly, "You will not encounter any danger in the first half of the Great Waterway. But in the New World, with your strength, it's simply not enough to see. If you encounter something you can't solve, give me a call, don't hold it alone." Now that Hancock followed his advice, he left the windlass belt and began to become stronger. Then how could Chris be so cold-blooded and concerned about Hancock's safety? That's inevitable. At this time, his impression of Hancock became very good. This woman, not so unreasonable, is still worthy of praise. Chris, you are not allowed to underestimate Igia. Hancock acted coquettishly and said angrily, you all look down on the concubine body, don't believe in the strength of the concubine body, humming tilde tilde. When the concubine enters the new world, I will definitely prove with strength that you are all wrong. Being denied by new mother-in-law, she can still accept it. But the other party has replaced his sweetheart, so Hancock is absolutely unacceptable. She secretly made a decision that no matter what happened, she would not turn to Chris for help. She didn't want her sweetheart to look down on her. Even if there is a great danger, he will never be contacted. Okay, it's not like this before. Chris ignored Hancock's coquettish tone at all, and had no other thoughts, and was still so calm. At this point, the call is over. The girls in the training room were all stunned when they heard Hancock's angry tone just now. There was a look of surprise on his face. The brain is completely useless. I heard it right, Boya, Hancock was coquettish to Chris. The Queen's sweetheart turned her head to look at the girls, her beautiful eyes widened, but she didn't react. Betty nodded, couldn't help but smile and said, it seems that Chris's charm is really too strong. Even the #1 beauty in the world is fascinated by him. Perona was flying in the air and said with a smile, although this princess doesn't know love, there is indeed something wrong with that woman's tone of voice. Leju looked at Chris' figure, her flawless face showed emotion, and murmured, actually, it's not strange, it's normal. Chris is so good, so strong, it makes perfect sense that Boya, Hancock would like him. Baccarat stroked her crimson hair and joked. If the men outside know that the world's #1 beauty already has a heart, I'm afraid that everyone will vomit blood with anger. We must all envy Chris and admire him. Big guys, when you see this, you will know that Hancock will definitely encounter danger later, but she will definitely not call Chris. What will be the plot later? I won't spoil it here, anyway, it is very wonderful. 043. Dark fruits, clone fruits, phantasmal bat fruits. 4 days later. Inside the training room. What do you think is the best devil fruit for Chris to choose? Queen Sweetheart looked at the devil fruit illustration on the table and said something with a smile. Betty spit out the smoke from her mouth and said lightly, we don't care about this kind of thing, let Chris make his own decision. Perona is still the same, floating in the air, full of interest. I think you demons bat fruit, this is very powerful. As long as you eat this devil fruit, you can stay young forever and never grow old. Zizzo, what a powerful devil fruit, Haley ha ha ha. Leju shook her head gently, her delicate chin was supported by her small hand, and a gentle and pleasant smile appeared on her face. This devil fruit must be extremely important to others, and everyone wants to get it. But for Chris, it's normal. Leju looked at Chris's figure, her beautiful eyes were full of admiration, and she affirmed in her tone, Chris is extremely strong in the development of repulsive fruits. I believe that one day he must be able to develop some ability, such as repulsion of aging. At that time, the bat fruit will have no effect, and it seems very tasteless. So, my personal suggestion is not to choose this devil fruit. Baccarat nodded, smiled slightly, and said with the same firm tone, Chris will definitely develop this trick, there is no doubt about it. Although the bat fruit is an phantom beast, it is extremely rare, but it is really not suitable for Chris. The sweetheart queen flipped through the devil fruit book, and finally stopped in front of a pineapple-shaped devil fruit. I saw this fruit, which was lavender, and the pattern on it was a snail spiral. Chris talked about a lot of devil fruits, and the more promising one is this dark fruit. The Queen Sweetheart frowned at this strange devil fruit and said incomprehensibly, this fruit cannot be elementalized, this shortcoming is too fatal. I think it's better not to choose this one. Betty leaned back on the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, took a breath and said, in the list that Chris made, the one I like most is the Superhuman series, Crushed Fruit. Just from the name, you can tell how powerful this fruit is. If Chris is allowed to eat it, with his amazing talent, he will definitely be able to smash everything in the future. Perona shook her head again and objected, if you want to choose the superhuman type, it's better to pick that bone fruit. After eating, the body can turn into bones. How fun, Haley tilde. Leju looked at them with a sweet smile on her delicate and fair face, and expressed her opinion. If I had to choose, I would suggest that Chris eat the barometric fruit. If this superhuman devil fruit is obtained by Chris, it will be even more powerful. He controls the air pressure of the entire battlefield, and directly detonates the air pressure when the opponent is not paying attention. And he can reject the space and leave in an instant without any danger at all. But the opponent is different and will inevitably be hit hard. Leju touched her white chin and said with a smile, of course, this is just my personal opinion, and it may not be correct. The copyright of the novel resource belongs to the original author. The text is only for personal study and trial reading. Please download it here after deleting it within 24 hours. Please support subscribing to Genuine Novels and refuse piracy. This novel was first published by Dragon. Feilu's novel internal group 1,142,529,731. More wonderful Feilu novels are in the hands of the group owner. Welcome to the group. You analyzed it very well. Chris must have thought about it. Bakura tucked her hair together and smiled, but in the Superman category, Chris values the avatar fruit the most. If he eats this fruit and then separates out another self, his combat power will increase exponentially. Let's ask, 2-on-1, who else is Chris' opponent? Suddenly, the voice of an alarm officer came from the door. Report. Ahead to Carlette Town, ahead to. Hearing the voice of the alarm officer, the girls stopped chatting. The sweetheart queen closed the devil fruit book and said with a smile, okay, let's not discuss it, let Chris make his own decision. Right now, all we need to do is get to town and get some makeup, that's the most important thing. The queen's sweetheart touched her face and sighed, I have been floating at sea, and my skin has deteriorated. I must buy more this time. Betty glanced at her and said angrily, everywhere you go, you buy so many cosmetics, how dare you say it? I'm in town, I'll have a good time shopping later. It's really boring on the boat. Perona was very happy, and she flew up and down. Leju smiled and said, since everyone has to buy things, let me buy some lipstick too. At this time, Bakura looked at the figure in front of him, gentle and pleasant, and said something. Chris, take a break, I feel good luck has come. Hearing her words, the girls were stunned. Good luck again so soon. Incredible. Let's go. Chris has always acted resolutely, put away the blood-red sword, and walked towards the door. Queen of Sweetheart stood up and said with a slight smile, what will it be this time? Is it a devil fruit, or is it a newcomer? Betty shrugged and said casually, in the town, it can't be a devil fruit, it must be a newcomer. Sister Bakura is amazing. Every time I hear this princess is very excited. Haley ha 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 ha. Perona flew to Bakura with a look of anticipation on her face. Graceful steps, nodded, and said with a smile, Bakura's fruit ability is indeed too powerful. With her here and Chris' strength, no matter what you do, you will be successful immediately and there will be no problem. I have read all your comments about the next devil fruit Chris ate. Then this chapter mentions these devil fruits. Which one do you think is more suitable? Please continue to leave a message in the comment area. *. 044. Another newcomer, Basil Hawkins. On the deck. The captain has appeared again. I hope this newcomer is a belligerent. I have been waiting to be the captain of the first team. Way ha ha ha. Basas raised his arms high, his face full of excitement. Poison Q coughed and said, don't be like Trafalgar, Row, everything else is acceptable. Lafitte turned his cane, still very polite. Rona is not interested in the squad leader, or based on his strength, even if he is not the captain of the first squad, there is no problem in being the second squad. Luo was crying with the demon sword in his arms, and said coldly, there are still too few people. When we gather 6 or 7, we can just fight one game. The sweet queen glanced at them and was really speechless. Every time good luck comes, I always think about fighting for the squad leader. Is it interesting? Men, all advocate force and like to solve things with fists. Leiju looked at Queen Sweetheart and said with a smile, this is the commonality of all men, but it is understandable. She actually agrees with the ship rules set by Chris. With absolute strength, Chris intimidated the entire ship and made them rationalize the competition. In this way, the strength of the crew will definitely increase very quickly. Really very good practice. Let's go. Chris didn't talk nonsense, just jumped down and landed in Carlet Town. Padong didn't follow Chris this time, and jumped directly on Bebo's shoulder. These two animals, who have recently been called brothers, are too close to each other. Soon, everyone jumped to the shore and headed towards the town. In the town, on a certain street. This is a very prosperous road. On both sides of the street, there are various shops, makeup shops, clothing shops. At the end of the street, there are many people setting up street stalls here, selling small accessories and seafood. There are many things in a dazzling array. Fortune telling, hanging on it. Excuse me, how much Bailey does it take for a fortune telling? Passers-by looked at the stall owner and asked curiously. Hawkins played cards and said calmly, fortune telling, it depends on the person. You don't have anything special, so I'm not going to help you predict the future. The passerby was stunned for a moment, unable to react. What does this mean? Money can't be fortune telling. At this time, a stall owner next to him laughed and said, it's very strange for this young man to set up a stall. It's not for making money, it's just a hobby. He's always been like this, we're used to it, there's nothing we can do about him. When the other stall owners heard it, they laughed, and the laughter was somewhat sarcastic. They've known Hawkins for a while, and the guy is always tugging, so cold, and doesn't talk to them at all. When fortune telling, he often offends guests, making him look like a fool. They are ashamed to be with him. Sick. Hearing the words of the other stall owners, the passerby cursed in a low voice, then turned and walked away. Hawkins ignored the surrounding situation at all, lowered his head, and played cards to himself. At this moment, the sound of noisy footsteps came, accompanied by the sound of conversation. Is that him? The sweetheart queen looked at the man in front of her, frowned, shook her head and said, strange eyebrows, special eyes and nose, how can I say it? This person seems to have a problem, very melancholy, there is a gloomy feeling, very uncomfortable. Betty took a breath, calmly as always, appearance is not important, strength is enough. Perona was flying in the air, wrinkled her face, and said directly, it's so ugly, this princess doesn't like him. Reiju touched her delicate chin and analyzed it. His appearance does look like a fortune teller. Could it be that his ability is to predict the future? If that's the case, then it's pretty awesome. Vashis shrugged his shoulders and said a little depressedly, there is no hope, this guy can't be strong at first glance. Lafitte adjusted his top hat and said gently, being able to be selected by Miss Baccarat, this person's strength will definitely not be too bad. Luo frowned and said indifferently, this person gives me a very strange feeling. Hearing a bunch of people commenting on himself, Hawkins stopped playing cards, slowly raised his head, and looked at the new customer. The first person, in black clothes and black trousers, looked calm and composed, exuding a unique temperament. As for the others, there are men and women, all of them are very powerful. At this moment, the black-clothed man spoke, expressionless and calm. Introduce myself. I'm the captain of the Chris Pirates, Chris. I passed by here by chance and felt that you have good strength and are qualified to join my fleet. Chris looked at Hawkins and said lightly, Since you are good at predicting the future, then you can count on your next destiny. The others did not speak, watching Hawkins silently, waiting for him to answer. Hawkins ignored Chris and the others and moved his hands quickly to shuffle the cards. Battle, the defeat rate is 100%. Hawkins drew a card, glanced at it, and said something to himself. After that, he put the cards aside and continued to draw. Escape, the success rate is 0%. Seeing Hawkins predict the future like this made everyone feel very interesting. Queen Sweetheart looked at Hawkins with a curious look on her pretty face, and said with a slight smile, "It turns out that his so-called prediction is like this. However, it seems to be quite accurate." Guys, the author has read all your comments in the book review area. I will think about which devil fruit to choose next. You can continue to comment and let's discuss it. Asterisk 045, Reverse Repulsion, Vientiantianian. Is this magic? It looks like a lot of fun, ha 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 ha. Corona's little face is full of interest, she has always liked this kind of new things. Betty spit out the smoke in her mouth and said lightly, in front of Chris, he has no other choice at all, and his fate is already doomed. Leju looked at Baccarat, blinked her beautiful eyes, and smiled, a very calm person, his strength should be very good. Baccarat nodded and said gently, it's the first time I've seen a magician, and I don't know much about this type of person. But if Chris can send an invitation, it will definitely not be too weak to prove his strength. Bassos has always been direct, and he is a very straightforward person. Seeing Hawkins like this, I feel particularly uncomfortable. If you're a big man, you can't be decisive and predict something. Poison Q looked at Bassos, showed a mysterious smile, and coaxed, otherwise, beat him directly and see if he dares to agree. Lafitte turned his cane, still politely, Poison Q, don't always destroy the team's feelings, it's very dangerous for you to do this. I don't think Bassos is necessarily his opponent, even if he fights. Luo looked at Hawkins, this man was really weird, and being able to be so calm showed his strength to himself. Very confident. At this moment, Hawkins' calm voice rang again. Defense, evasion rate 0%. Ellipsis 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 ellipsis. Join, the success rate is 100%. After reading a lot, Hawkins put away the cards and said calmly, I have predicted the future, Captain. The Queen Sweetheart stroked her golden hair and said casually, this result is actually already doomed. There's another newcomer, and this time the team is even stronger. Betty took a breath and said lightly. Leju looked at Chris back and smiled sweetly, this is a good thing, the probability of the plan being successful is getting bigger and bigger. Let's go. After Chris finished speaking, he turned around without saying anything to Hawkins. Seeing these people leave, the stall owners on the side quickly started talking. Who are those people? Why are they all vicious? Who else could it be? All vicious pirates. Hawkins, this kid, actually joined the pirate group, is he stupid? Whatever he does, even if this person is gone, it's annoying to see him. Zizhu, don't mention it, those female pirates just now are really beautiful. Kong Shun, all female pirates are very strong. With your small body, you will definitely be squeezed dry. Ha ha ha. Above Chris. Needless to say, Chris certainly couldn't have said anything to Hawkins, and after explaining it, he went to practice. For Hawkins, the melancholy man, the Queen Sweetheart and others, they don't like him very much. Not a good impression of him. So, they were too lazy to get to know him one by one and left with Chris. Welcome to the Chris Pirates, I'm Vice Captain Lafitte. These words, Lafitte said very smoothly and politely said, next, I will talk to you. After listening to Lafitte's words, Hawkins nodded and said something calmly. Very good rules, if you don't have strength, then keep silent. Bashes glanced at him and laughed, if you say that, you have to participate in the battle for squad leader. I have been waiting for this day for a long time. How about Hawkins, let's fight. Poison Q said with a smile, I've been waiting for a long time, and I'm looking forward to the appearance of the captain of the first team. Hawkins is still so gloomy, with a dead face. The number is too small. When we enter the Great Waterway, we will fight again at that time. Hearing this, Bosses got angry, and said cursingly, "Damn, no one fights, is it a man? Forget it, I won't ask about it in the future, what's up with love?" After speaking, he turned and left angrily. Poison Q's vicissitudes of life had a mysterious smile on his face. It's a pity, I really want to see the crew fighting. Lafitte turned his cane and said with a slight smile, "Luo, like you, will not be involved in the battle for the squad leader for the time being." Actually, that's fine. When there are more crew members, then the battle for the deputy captain and the battle for the squad leader will be carried out together. As for the battle for captains, that's needless to say. Lafitte stood the crutches in front of him, his pale face showed a rare serious expression, and said solemnly, "Chris pirates, the captain can only be Chris, there is no doubt about that." With the understanding of Chris, Lafayette has been convinced and has incomparable respect for Chris. Anyone who dares to challenge Chris' majesty will disrespect him. Lafitte was the first not to agree. The captain fights, and whoever participates will be slaughtered. Luo said coldly, and then walked directly to the side, still so cold. Hawkins nodded and said in a low voice, "In battle, the failure rate is 100%. This is the first time I have encountered such a situation. This shows how strong Captain Chris is." Lafitte showed a polite smile and said something very gentlemanly. "Next, I'll talk to you about other things. Future voyage route, and future goals. I saw that the gravitational fruit was mentioned in the comment area. In fact, this is not to be considered. For positive repulsion, use Shenluo Tianzheng. In reverse repulsion, you can use Vientiantianian. Therefore, there is no need to eat gravitational fruit at all. Repel fruit, not only repulsion can also attract *. 046. Hancock makes the sea boil. 5 days later. Naval Headquarters, Marin Vando. In the spacious conference room, there were many generals sitting. "Meet now." Warring States was sitting upright, with a serious face, and said to Branu, "Send the information down." "Yes, Sengoku-sama. Blanco is a very competent assistant. He does things cleanly and efficiently, and distributes the materials in no time." At this time, Warring States looked at the generals and said solemnly, "Recently, the sea has been very unstable, and a lot of things have happened. The 4 emperors occupying the New World are constantly expanding their territories and recruiting troops, and they simply don't care about the navy. As for Chiwahai, these garbage at sea have been very restless recently." Warring States knocked on the desk and said solemnly, "Jolakal, Mahak who does her own way, Don Quixote, Doflamingo who conducts underground transactions. However, the most critical issue is Amazon, Queen of Lily, Boya, Hancock. Blano, you will report on Boya, Hancock's recent situation." Branu nodded and said respectfully, "Yes, Lord Warring States." Then, he looked at the generals present and continued, 3 days ago, Boya, Hancock led the Amazon, Lily nationals into the Great Waterway. Then, battle after battle broke out. The evil spirit with a bounty of 83 million Baileys, Railgen, the black iron with a bounty of 37 million Baileys, the bounty of 11 million. Brano read out several names in a row, which shows that he has done his homework, there is no doubt about that. We called her and asked her why she did it. After all, Boya, Hancock has been in the windless belt and has never sailed this far. Branu looked at the generals and said with a clear mind, the answer she gave was to go to the New World. As for what it was for, she didn't give an answer. Warring States took his words and said with a serious face, she is not only Chiwahai, but also the #1 beauty in the world. If this woman really enters the New World, it will definitely make the sea boil, which is not what we hope to appear. Warring States looked at the generals present and said in a deep voice, she is Chiwahai, with the slogan of exterminating pirates, we can't say anything more to her. Okay, now let's discuss and analyze why Boya, Hancock behaves so strangely. Sakaski is the toughest, with a look of determination in his eyes, and said very seriously, "Is it necessary for so many people to participate in the discussion for a mere Boya, Hancock? What the Shichibukai, a bunch of damn pirates, the most disgusting garbage in the sea." Corisolino leaned back in the chair, crossed his legs, and clipped his nails, looking like he was hanging around. "The current Shichibukai is really scary tilde. Warring States glanced at the two of them, completely ignoring their words. For both of them, he disliked them very much, and the impression was very poor. Sakaski is too tough, insisting on twisted justice. Pelusolino, doing nothing all day, too lazy to be like a dog. Ha ha ha, Warring States, let's not talk about that, do you want a donut? Garp gulped and laughed very happily. Such a serious meeting was directly destroyed by him. Bastard Garp. Warring States glared at him fiercely, and said angrily, "Who made you eat donuts here, ha?" At this time, Doberman looked at the people present and said coldly, "General Sakaski is right, these Chihuahai are all scum from the sea. Just like them, it's not worth our discussion at all. If they dare to go too far, then implement absolute justice and capture them all in the city." He is Sakaski's subordinate, loyal to Sakaski, and his character is naturally very strong. Typical Hawk General. The strength is very strong, and the only lieutenant general who dared to scold the 4 emperors in the war at the top. Only him. That's right, Chihuahai is garbage, why should we discuss them? Ghost Spider was holding a cigarette and said decisively, "The Navy is the strongest force in the sea. For the scum of Chihuahai, they should all be consumed. I firmly support General Sakaski, there is really no need to discuss them at this time." Like Doberman, this is also a typical hawkish general. "Yes, Admiral Sakaski is right, stop discussing them." The other hawk generals hurriedly chimed in. It can be seen that Sakaski, the core figure of the Hawks, is highly respected. Absolutely a one-of-a-kind presence. The generals of the Dove faction all looked at Qingzi, hoping that he would stand up and speak. After all, the opposite was the hawkish boss Sakaski, and they didn't have the guts to speak at all. "We can only rely on the leader of the Dove faction, General Aokiji. Everyone is watching what I do. Didn't the Warring States Marshal say it? Let's discuss it." Aokiji twisted his neck, yawned and said, "I slept too late last night, I was so sleepy, go to sleep first." After speaking, he took off the blindfold on his forehead, leaned on the chair and fell asleep. Seeing Qingzi like this, the Dove generals looked at each other one by one, helpless. The person they support is this character, who is very lazy. They are used to this, but they won't feel anything. Warring States glanced at Qingzi, too lazy to scold him. Among the 3 generals, he is most optimistic about the green pheasant. Unfortunately, this guy is too lazy, always doesn't care about anything, and looks like, "I'm sleepy," every day. This made the Warring States really have a headache. It can only be said that the 3 generals have problems, and none of them are normal. 047, Hancock is in the paper. Let me tell you my opinion. The Crane staff supported his chin with his hands, and his eyes flashed with the light of wisdom. At a glance, you can tell that he is a very shrewd old man. Hearing her opening, whether it was a hawk general or a dove, they all looked at her. They all have great respect for this old man. I admire her wisdom. What is Xiaohei's opinion? Come and listen. Garp was eating donuts, laughing loudly, very boldly. Staff officer he didn't look at him, and said to himself, "Boya, Hancock, she is a very proud woman. Now, her fame is strong enough that she doesn't need to prove anything at all. So it's not her purpose to gain fame by hunting pirates. As for doing things for the Navy and taking the initiative to clean up these bounty prisoners, this is definitely not her purpose." Crane folded his arms in front of him, and said with certainty, "Then there is only one answer, she wants to become stronger. Next, she will definitely enter the new world, pick those powerful opponents, and fight them. After all, the Amazon, Lily women are all militants and won't be content to be lonely. Carp clapped the table, laughed and said, "Amazing, awesome. Xiaohei, you are still as smart as before, too wise, ha ha ha." Sengoku ignored the bastard Garp, nodded and agreed. The Crane staff is very reasonable. It seems that Boya, Hancock, this woman, has other ideas in her heart. She is now desperate to improve her strength and make herself stronger. As for what purpose she has, we need to continue to follow up and investigate. Porosalino leaned against the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, and said yin and yang strangely, "The women now are really scary." Sakaski's eyes were extremely firm, and he said firmly, "If that's the case, then we can't just sit back and watch. I propose that for absolute justice, she must be punished." The other Hawks generals nodded one by one, and quickly agreed. Doves here, still the same, keep silent. The leaders are sleeping, how can they oppose the Hawks' proposal? This is the admiral, and the meeting is noisy. Tautu looked at these generals, and felt more and more disgusted in her heart. Especially Sakaski. This guy keeps talking about justice, but what he can do is not like a navy. Just like a bandit. Speaking of which, the lucky fruit of Baccarat is really great. Constantly affecting Tautu, causing him to fall completely towards Chris. On the opposite side of the navy. Ellipsis 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 ellipsis. Chris, above deck. Quack quack tilde tilde. A news bird flew across the sky, making a pure voice, as if asking the people below if they wanted to buy a newspaper. Have one. Lafitte raised his head, turned his cane, and said something with a slight smile. With a whoosh, a white bird landed on the railing. I saw that it had white feathers, a black hat, and a reddish-brown bag hanging around its neck. This is for collecting money. Is it still 100 Baileys? Lafitte said politely, looking at the newsbird. Newsbird didn't make a sound, but nodded. Lafitte took the newspaper and put 100 Baileys into the bag, looking like a gentleman. Goodbye, I wish you a smooth journey. Yeah tilde tilde. The newsbird nodded again, made a cheerful call, flapped its wings, and continued to deliver the newspaper. The co-captain is still so polite and a good man. The crew below, looking at Lafitte's figure, all had a very good impression of him. Bassas was practicing his armed domineering and said with a smile, "Lafitte, is there any big news?" Hawkins did not speak, he was also practicing domineering. A few days ago, Chris took a little time to explain the cultivation of domineering for him. For a time, let him have a shocking rush. He never knew that there was such a miraculous ability in this world. The respect for Chris in his heart has risen to the extreme. He has completely returned to his heart and regards himself as a member of the Chris Pirates. As soon as Lafitte opened the newspaper and looked at the photo above, he was stunned for a moment. The world's #1 beauty, Boya, Hancock is in the newspaper. Chris has already told them that there is another member of the Chihuahua Alliance. That is the Queen of Nine Snake Island, the woman on the newspaper. Sure enough, as the captain said, the world's #1 beauty is really in the newspaper. Lafitte nodded secretly, feeling very emotional in his heart. Everything, exactly as Chris said, made Lafayette admire him even more. Shibukai Boya, Hancock, she's in the newspaper. Luo came over, saw the woman on the newspaper, and said a word coldly. Hawkins said in a low voice, "It's the partner," the captain said. "It seems that we have to speed up." Poison Q was researching poison and coughed, "This can't be rushed." The captain said, "Travel around the world and recruit enough men to enter the Great Waterway." Alas, the reputation has been robbed by others, it's so annoying. Bashas shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly, "Since we went to sea, we have passed through the South China Sea, the West China Sea, and now we have reached the North China Sea. But along the way, I didn't have half of the navy, what a bastard." Guys, the above is a picture of a news bird. This kind of bird is very interesting, so I specially found this picture, which is more intuitive. Asterisk. 048. There is a beautiful singer on the boat, Karina. It is understandable that there is no navy with Baccarat. Lafitte walked to the training room and said with a slight smile, "Such an important matter, we must let the captain know earlier." Luo hugged the ghost and cried, "Still so cold, what do you do when you encounter a navy? Sailing like this is undoubtedly the best. You don't have to face the pursuit of the navy at all, you can be at ease and save trouble." Hawkins nodded and said calmly, "After all, we will be Chihuahai in the future. Try not to have a conflict with the navy, it will be better for us." The door of the training room. Knock knock knock. Lafitte didn't go in, but knocked on the door. "Captain, I have good news for you." Although he knew what Chris was like and knew that he would not mess around in it, in order to avoid embarrassing situations, it was best to knock on the door. "Come in." Inside the door, Chris' voice came. With a crunch, Lafitte pushed open the wooden door and walked in slowly. This was the first time he walked into this training room. Looking into his eyes, he saw Chris wielding a large knife in front of him. On the left side of the door, a lot of beautiful women were sitting there. "Lafitte, is there some good news in the papers?" Queen Sweetheart's beautiful eyes lit up, a sweet smile bloomed on her pretty face, and she hurriedly asked. Karina nodded, her voice very sweet, and affirmed, "I think, that Boya, Hancock, she must be in the newspaper." The day before yesterday, she traveled to Jinkador town and met Chris and others. As a result, needless to say, with Baccarat, she would definitely board the boat obediently. When everyone knew her ability, they were very happy. This woman is a singer, she sings so well that she can hear it perfectly. When the banquet is held in the future, you can let her sing to add to the fun. Really good. I think so too. Betty took a breath and said something lightly. Lafayette handed the newspaper to Baccarat, and the gentleman said, "It is indeed the news from Boya, Hancock. Look at it, I'm going out first. This is Chris's private domain. He doesn't want to stay too long, so it's better to leave quickly." The girls came over one by one, opened the newspaper and read it. Wow! Perona flew in the air, with a look of amazement on her face, and praised, "This Hancock is really beautiful. I saw the Empress on the photo, her hair was fluttering, her face was impeccable, and her figure was extremely good. Even through the newspaper, you can feel a fairy chi attacking. This woman is really beautiful. The #1 beauty in the world is really extraordinary." Leiju touched her delicate chin, blinked her beautiful eyes, and said something with a smile. Karina showed a sweet smile, her voice was like the sound of heaven, and she followed up, "It's so powerful and so alluring, it's perfect. It's no wonder it's being sought after by so many men, it's really normal." Betty spit out the smoke from her mouth, "It's a big action, and it has solved several pirates in a row, with a bounty of tens of millions of pirates." Queen of Sweethearts said with a smile, "It seems that Chris's words have stimulated the #1 beauty in the world. This man is arrogant, and he will definitely prove his strength to Chris and impress Chris." Baccarat looked at the figure in front of him, dignified and elegant. Chris, Boya, Hancock entered the great waterway and attracted the attention of all parties. Judging from the newspapers, many pirates are interested in her and want to see the world's #1 beauty. I'm afraid that in the future, she will meet a lot of powerful bigwigs, and she will definitely not be able to cope by then. Chris didn't stop practicing, waving the blood-red sword, and said calmly, "Don't worry about her, just let her go. If she is really killed, it can only mean that she is not qualified enough to cooperate with us at all. How much other men like Hancock has nothing to do with Chris. For women, he has never paid so much attention to it. This point, since he crossed over, has already made a decision. What he wants to take is the road of being a strong man, but he won't spend too much time on women." Hearing Chris's cold-blooded words, all the girls were stunned for a moment. This is the most beautiful woman in the world, can't you care? It is really cruel to say such cold words. If Boya, Hancock heard this, he would be stunned. The Queen's sweetheart shook her head and said with a wry smile, she, the #1 beauty in the world, should be treated like this by a man, she will be shocked. Betty looked at Chris' figure and agreed, our captain is so powerful. What's wrong with the world's #1 beauty, she's still disdainful. Karina covered her mouth with a chuckle, made a silver bell-like sound, and said with a smile, if Hancock is here, I really want to see the expression on her face. Should be surprised, very angry, he tilde. Corona was flying in the air and laughed, I really want to see it too, it must be interesting, ha 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 Hully. Leju looked at Baccarat, smiled and said, Chris is still so calm, and he will never change for anyone. Baccarat nodded and smiled lightly, he is firm in his heart, has his own goals, and will not be controlled by anyone. Even the #1 beauty in the world can't affect him. 049, the pirate with the highest bounty in the North Sea. One day later. North Sea, above a certain sea area. Report. I found an island in the front right, and there is a pirate ship parked on the shore. Front right. Listening to the voice of the alarm officer, Bassos quickly stood up and looked forward to the right. There is really a pirate ship, now we can fight, way ha 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 tilde. Bassos raised his arms high, looking excited, too happy. Poison Q also looked in that direction, smiled strangely and said, I haven't killed anyone for a long time, now I can finally see blood. Lafitte turned his cane and smiled slightly, it's really not easy, since I went to sea, this is the first batch of pirates we encountered. However, it's not up to us whether the ship will change course or not. Lafitte looked at them and said with a serious face, the helm of this ship can only be Captain Chris. Luo nodded and agreed, let's just wait for the news, don't bother about it. Hawkins followed up, a ship can only have one captain. No matter what the sailing route is, only the captain can make the decision, there is no doubt about that. Just then, there was a sound of footsteps. A look of anticipation on her pretty face, Queen's sweetheart said with a smile, there are pirates, and good luck has come. Such a situation has never been encountered before. Betty looked at the front right and said lightly, this time, things must be different. Karina raised her eyebrows, blinked her eyes with a sly light, and said with a smile, at that time, you must rob their treasure. Corona floated in the air and let out a crisp laugh, this princess will let these pirates know what fear is, ha 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 Hully. At this time, Bashes jumped up, laughed and said, the captain has appeared, it seems that I can have a big fight. Poison Q smiled, I can finally kill people, I have endured it for a long time. Then you have to look forward to it. I hope the strength of the other party is not too weak. Lafitte stood his cane in front of him, and the gentleman smiled, after all, if you want to fight with us, ordinary pirates are not enough to fight. Luo cried with the demon sword in his arms, and said coldly, actually, what I want to watch the most is the captain's battle. But this is the North Sea. There are no powerful pirates at all, and the captain is impossible to take action. Hawkins nodded, if the captain takes action, it's none of our business. In this case, the crew below will not be able to get experience. Soon, the Chris came to the shore and stopped beside another pirate group. Seeing the huge pirate ship on the side, everyone started talking. Bassos was excited and said with a big laugh, with such a big pirate ship, the opponent's strength is definitely not too weak. Now we can fight well. Poison Q looked at the big ship with a mysterious smile, that ship is bigger than ours, why don't you just grab it? Our ship is really not big enough. Hawkins, as always dead, said in a low voice, in the future, there will be more and more newcomers, and it will be crowded at that time. Luo nodded and echoed, it's really time to change ships. Okay tilde. Corona's beautiful eyes were shining, and she smiled, the ship opposite is too domineering, we will use that ship in the future. Karina looked at the big ship without blinking her eyes, and said with emotion, "There must be a lot of treasure in such a big pirate ship. It's really happening now. I know this pirate flag." Leju touched her white chin and said with a smile. Queen Sweetheart hurriedly asked, and quickly said, "Leju, what is the origin of the other party? Why is the pirate ship so big?" The others didn't say much. Chi-Chi looked at Leju, waiting for her to give an answer. Leju tucked her hair together, and her flawless face showed a gentle and pleasant smile. "I have investigated the relatively well-known pirate groups in Beihai. This pirate flag is the symbol of the White Ghost Pirates. Captain Oliver, the White Ghost, is the pirate with the highest bounty in the North Sea, 83 million Baileys." Leju looked at everyone, smiled sweetly and said, "This guy is ruthless and has committed crimes for many years, killing many civilians in the Navy. Although they have been chased by the Navy, they are often able to escape early, which is a headache for the Navy." Hearing Reju's words, Basas shrugged, feeling a little depressed. "It's only 83 million Baileys. This motherfucker is too weak. How can you get hundreds of millions of dollars, so that you can play well?" Lafitte adjusted his top hat and said gently, "What you said is completely unreasonable. The four seas are no better than the Great Waterway, and the bounty is generally very low. Being able to offer a reward of more than 80 million in Beihai, this Oliver's strength is definitely not weak." Luo nodded and agreed, "In the land of the four seas, this is the first time I have heard such a high bounty." Hawkins was still so calm and said in a low voice, "I have heard of this person, who is the notorious pirate in the North Sea. Since this guy is so bad, it makes sense to rob him of his boat." The Queen Sweetheart blinked her beautiful eyes, and a lovely smile appeared on her pretty face. At this time, Chris made a sound and said calmly, "Little ones, go check it out, that ship will belong to us in the future." "Yes, Captain Chris. Hurry up, change the ship, ha ha ha. Hurry up for Lao Su, there must be treasures on the boat," quacked Tilda. Hey, when we meet our Captain Chris, it can only be considered unlucky for you, and we will observe 3 minutes of silence for you. Don't talk nonsense of Dutay Niang, grab it and say it again, la la la. I haven't had a fight with pirates since I went to sea. It's time to fight. By the way, can you guess what is on the island? There must be a lot of collectibles of the North Sea Overlord, asterisk. 050, this is a natural devil fruit. Deep in the island. At this time, there were a lot of pirates gathered here, all of them bachelors, not a single woman. Brothers, take out all the treasures you grabbed this time. Oliver sat on top of a boulder and waved his hand in an arrogant tone. He was tall, with a fat head and big ears, a full beard, and a fierce look in his eyes. This appearance, like an evil ghost, can stop Shower from crying. Yes, Captain Oliver. Everyone hurriedly got busy, all with excitement on their faces, too excited. As pirates, this moment is undoubtedly their favorite. In the roar, all the treasures were poured out. Gold and silver jewelry, silk satin, emerald pearls. Stacked up into a hill, under the sunlight, they shimmered with colorful rays of light. Very dazzling. The things I robbed this time seem to be pretty good, ha ha ha. Oliver raised his head and laughed loudly, and said very arrogantly, "Pick the treasures and see what's good." Then, there was laughter from time to time. "Wow, this gold is heavy. This pearl must be very valuable," quacked Tilda. "Send it, the treasure we grabbed this time is enough for us to use for a few months, hee hee hee." At this moment, a little boy shouted loudly, "Devil fruit! I found the devil fruit!" Hearing this, the other little ones stopped one by one and looked over quickly. This time, Oliver couldn't sit still, stood up quickly, and strode forward. "Get out of the way for Lao Su, and go with your business." The little ones were very afraid of Oliver, so they quickly dispersed and continued to pick treasures. Kate looked at Oliver and said with a smile on her face, "Captain, we've really developed now." He was the co-captain with a bounty of 31 million Baileys. Oliver took the small box and saw 3 things inside. A devil fruit, a notebook, and 2 phone bugs. Oliver is a person who is rough on the outside and narrow on the inside. After turning his head, he said loudly, "Where did you get this little box?" Little fellows stopped and looked at each other. At this moment, a thin young man raised his hand and said happily, "Captain, it's me, I found it." The people next to him all looked at him with envy on their faces, feeling that this guy was about to rise to prominence. Oliver has no reason not to reward him for discovering such a good thing. Oliver picked up the devil fruit, laughed and said, very good, very good. Where did you grab it? Say it and listen." The little guy hurried forward and explained excitedly, "Captain, I got it from an old man's house. I killed the old guy if he didn't hand over the treasure and rummaged around the house. This little box was found under the bed." The little one rubbed his hands together and said with great excitement, "The small box was locked at the time, so I didn't open it to take a look. I didn't expect that there would be a devil fruit inside." Oliver waved his hand and laughed loudly, "I'll give you credit for picking out the treasure first." "Yes, yes, Captain Oliver." The little thief's eyes lit up and he was so excited that he hurried to the side. Kate looked at the devil fruit in Oliver's hand, frowned and said, "It's pineapple-shaped, and it's green all over. How does it feel like it's poisonous?" Oliver nodded, narrowed his eyes slightly, and agreed. "As I thought, this devil fruit is probably related to poison." After finishing speaking, he put the fruit aside, picked up the notebook, and said with a smile, "This thing is an old object at a glance. Open it and read it carefully." "Lokes, who is this? Never heard of that name." Kate looked at the notebook with a puzzled look on her face, not knowing this character at all. Oliver became more and more irritable, and couldn't help scolding, "What Kaido, what Charlotte, Ling Ling, what kind of people are they?" He slammed the notebook shut, didn't bother to look at it, and threw it directly to Kate. Then, he was about to pick up the 2 phone bugs. Suddenly, a loud laugh came. "A lot of treasures, these are ours, way ha ha ha." Shock. The members of the White Ghost Pirates were stunned. He quickly followed the voice and looked over. The leader was a young man in black clothes and black pants. "There are a lot of people behind, both men and women." "There are a lot of people, so I can slaughter a few now." Poison Q was lying on Stallone, with a cruel smile on his vicissitudes of life. Hawkins said in a low voice, "As expected of the overlord of the North Sea, there are indeed many treasures robbed." Luo carried the demon sword and cried, and said coldly, "This kind of person, burn, kill, loot, everyone deserves to die. I didn't expect to have a devil fruit. It seems that the luck this time is really good." Lafitte turned his cane and said something very gentlemanly. "Karina's beautiful eyes are sparkling, she likes treasure the most, and when she sees so many gold and silver jewelry, a smile immediately blooms on her pretty face. It's great, it's really exciting, he tilde tilde." Betty took a breath, glanced coldly at the people of the White Ghost Pirates, and said dissatisfiedly, "They robbed so many things, these people really deserve to die." Perona looked at Oliver in front, her face wrinkled, "This person is so ugly, this princess doesn't like him very much." The sweetheart queen nodded, smiled and said, "As his name suggests, he is indeed a notorious pirate." 051. Nature is a miasma fruit. This is an accomplice, ha ha ha. Oliver opened his hands, raised his head and laughed loudly, and said extremely arrogantly, "In Beihai, someone dares to snatch Lao Su's treasure." Eyes turned cold, and he glared at the person in front of him with a fierce tone, "You are living impatiently, little devils." Kate nodded, showing a cruel smile, and said coldly, "Don't rush to kill them later, those women are very beautiful, just for the brothers to have a good time." "Lord Kate, please leave one for the villain, whatever you want, he. Guys who are overcomprehensive, don't go out to inquire, we are the overlords of Beihai, and dare to provoke us and seek death. Stop talking nonsense, brethren, the copycats will kill them." That beauty with curly eyebrows has a really good figure. I'll have to play with her later, quacked Tilda. Queen Sweetheart looked at Leju and said with a smile, someone has taken a fancy to you, praise you for your good figure. Perona danced in the air and gave a silver bell-like laughter. Sister Leju is already very beautiful, she has a great figure, ha 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 ha. You are called beautiful, I can't compare to you. Leju rolled her eyes at the two of them, and there was a gentle and pleasant smile on her face, like a sister next door. At this time, Chris put his hands in his trouser pockets and said calmly, give you a minute to solve them. Yes, Captain. Lafitte turned his cane and respectfully agreed. Hawkins was melancholy as always, and said in a low voice, since we landed on the island, their fate has been doomed. Okay, don't talk nonsense, when I hate fighting the most, I'm there to grind and chirp. Bassos kicked the ground, and the man rushed forward like a cannonball. Then, bang bang bang, screams came one after another, and they were killed one by one. In the end, there was only one person still standing, and that was Oliver. Fear. Looking at such a terrifying scene, he trembled and said, forgive me. I will give you all my treasure. I'm sorry, these things belong to us in the first place. Lafitte looked like a gentleman, and with a wave of his cane, he launched an attack directly. Ah! After a scream, everyone in the White Ghost Pirates was wiped out. What the heck, the overlord of the North Sea is just stinky shit. Bashes kicked a corpse away and cursed. Poison Q smiled, it's been a long time since I killed someone, it feels so good. Lafitte turned his cane and said gently, I can't blame them for being too weak, we are really too strong. From now on, there will be no overlord in Beihai. Hawkins suddenly said such a sentence. At this time, Baccarat looked at the stalwart figure and said with a smile, Chris, the smell of blood is too strong here, let's go back to the boat. Karina waved her hands again and again, her beautiful eyes were shining, and she quickly said, you guys go first, I want to see what good treasures there are. As soon as the voice fell, he hurriedly walked towards the pile of treasures, looking like a small money fan. This guy really sees money. The sweetheart queen glanced at Karina, dumbfounded. Little ones, clean up the battlefield and bring everything back. After Chris finished speaking, he turned and left. Yes, Captain Chris. The crew members were very excited one by one, rushing to the Golden Mountain, very excited. Above the new Chris. It's very good, the more I look at it, the more satisfied I get. The Queen Sweetheart looked at the new ship and nodded, with a happy look on her pretty face. Betty spit out the smoke in her mouth and said lightly, it is indeed better than the previous one. Perona flew around in the air, grinning, this ship is so big, this princess can fly farther in the future, Haley ha 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 lie tilde tilde. Miss Baccarat, have you found it? What kind of devil fruit is this? Bassos looked at Baccarat and asked curiously. Lafitte turned his cane and said politely, it looks like a pineapple, it must be a natural devil fruit. But what kind of thing in nature could this color be? Baccarat stopped flipping the page, her beautiful eyes lit up, gentle and dignified, I found it, it's really natural. Leju touched her delicate chin and said generously, naturally, it is a miasma fruit, which can use miasma, and it is also corrosive. Looks like we've got an amazing devil fruit. Luo nodded, as indifferent as always, the miasma is poisonous, coupled with corrosive properties. This devil fruit, if developed well, is absolutely powerful. Hawkins said in a low voice, poison is the most troublesome. If there is no antidote, you can only wait to die. Poison Q rarely showed an excited look, and looked at Chris and said a quick sentence. Captain, this fruit suits me very well, let me eat it. Bashes shrugged his shoulders and said with a big laugh, you are poisonous, and this fruit is poisonous. It is indeed the most suitable for you. As you wish. After Chris finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the training room. Poison Q looked at his figure with a grateful expression on his face, Captain, you really are the best, he. Corona floated in the air and urged, "Don't talk about it, just eat it, it's from nature. This princess has grown up so big, and I have never seen a person with the ability of the nature department. Eat it quickly." 052. Looking for the sea overlord locks, the shocking treasure left behind. I went to see Chris to practice, how about you? Queen Sweetheart's impression of Poison Q is very bad. She doesn't like this person, so she is not interested in his affairs at all. Let's go. Betty said the same, then walked away. Seeing that all the girls were leaving, Corona snorted and said, "This princess is also gone, so don't look at it." Bashes looked at Poison Q and laughed loudly. "I see, everyone doesn't like you very much, way ha 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 ha." Luo nodded and continued, "It is indeed the case. Hawkins is very direct, it's normal for women to dislike a young man with such an old face. The other things are not important. Now I should eat the devil fruit quickly, and I will become stronger." Poison Q said nothing, just started eating. Vomit. Even Poison Q, a person with a weird personality, can't stand the smell of devil fruit. The old face became more and more ugly. Others didn't speak, and looked at Poison Q silently, eager to see what the magic of the so-called natural type devil fruit was. Hey, so strong, I feel that none of you are my opponents." Poison Q raised his hand and looked down, only to see his right hand gradually disappear, turning into a light green mist. Damn, don't mess around. Several people quickly backed away, for fear of inhaling the miasma and causing poisoning. Poison Q laughed and said strangely, "Next, let you see how powerful it is. Corrosion." He swung his right hand towards a chair next to him, and the miasma hit him as soon as he touched the chair. Sizzling tilde tilde. There was a crisp sound on the chair, the color on it kept falling off, and soon the whole chair was corroded. Completely disappeared. Very corrosive. Luo hugged the ghost crying, calmly analyzed and said, "If you don't have armed sex domineering, then fighting against the poisonous Q will be very dangerous." Hawkins said in a low voice, "Now, the position of the captain of the first team can be confirmed. Poison Q, you have always encouraged me to start a war before." Bashes laughed and said, "Now it's your turn, fight Lafitte, you will definitely win." Lafitte adjusted his top hat, and the gentleman said, "Anyone who has the strength can challenge me. However, it's unavoidable to get hurt a little bit. After all, there will always be some blood in a fight." Poison Q took the miasma back and said with a smile, "I'm not in a hurry for now. When I develop the fruit proficiently, then your position will be mine." Inside the training room. It's a lot more spacious and the air is better. Queen Sweetheart looked around and was very satisfied with this new venue. Leiju glanced at the notebook on the table, then turned to look at the constantly busy figure, smiled and asked, "Chris, have you read the notebook?" "I am done reading it." Chris waved his sword and passed over in a faint voice. Baccarat opened the book and said with a smile, "Let's take a look together." Time passed slowly, and soon everyone read the notebook, but there was a puzzled expression on their faces. "Who is Rox? He seems to be very powerful." Karina frowned her beautiful eyebrows and kept thinking about it in her mind, but she had never heard the name of this person. Betty spit out the smoke in her mouth and said lightly, "I have never heard of this person. He was a big man from a long time ago." Queen Sweetheart smiled slightly, "This notebook is so old, so the person who recorded it must be old. Ask Chris, he'll know for sure." Leiju supported her delicate chin, was gentle and dignified, smiled and said, "Chris, tell us about the contents of the book, we are all curious." Baccarat stroked her hair, her tone was very certain, "Although I don't know who Rox is, this treasure map must be real. Rox, 40 years ago, the figure who dominated the sea." Chris wielded a big knife and explained in detail, "At that time, he truly achieved the rule of the sea, and there were countless strong men under his hands. 30 years ago, an attack was launched in the Valley of the Gods with the intention of destroying the Tianlong people and taking over the entire world. In the end, he was defeated by the naval hero Garp and the pirate King Roger, and disappeared from the scene since then. Now among the 4 emperors, 3 of them are his former subordinates: Edward, Newgate, Charlotte, Lingling, Kaido. Chris concluded. In short, this is a real big man, a world-famous pirate. Hearing such shocking words, all the girls were stunned. It turned out to be such a terrifying big man. Karina was the first to react. Her beautiful eyes were extremely bright, her pretty face showed excitement, and she quickly said, "If you say that, then this treasure must be huge." She opened her jade arms and gestured, "It must be like a mountain, and it is full of treasures." Queen Sweetheart rolled her eyes at her and said angrily, "You know the treasure, and you are not interested in anything else." Betty took a breath, showing a rare expression of emotion. "This is the first time I have heard of such a powerful man. Looking at the situation, he must have been expelled from the world government, so there is no news about him in the sea, not even a word." Leiju touched her white chin and analyzed. All 3 of the 4 emperors have become his subordinates. The strength of this man is probably the strongest in the world. Baccarat folded her crimson hair with a serious face, having the courage to challenge the Tianlong people and almost succeeding. There is no doubt about his strength. Seeing this, everyone will know that Chris will definitely go looking for treasures. There must be a lot of good things there. What will there be? Are you looking forward to it? 053. Lieutenant General Momotu in high heels and jeans. 4 emperors. Perona flew in the air and said with a smile, "I remember Chris said that this is our goal in the future." The Queen Sweetheart nodded, crossed Erlang's legs, become Chihuahai first, attack a country in the New World, and then fight for the throne of the 4 emperors. "That's what we're going for the next few years," Chris said. Betty took a breath and said lightly, "Our territory will definitely be huge in the future. So, we must recruit enough subordinates to be able to stand alone and guard various places." Karina waved her hand, interrupted their conversation, and said quickly, "The other things are not important, now the problem is this treasure. This is the overlord of the previous era, a treasure left over, aren't you excited?" Karina clasped her hands tightly, her pretty face was full of excitement, and she said with great longing, "As long as we find there, we will not worry about food or clothing for the rest of our lives. Zizzo, you can buy whatever you want. This kind of life is so beautiful just thinking about it." Leiju tucked her hair together and smiled gently, "The key is still early, the treasure is in the New World, and we haven't arrived so soon, so why worry?" Then, the girls gathered around rocks and discussed. In the evening, exactly 8 o'clock. In the dark night sky, a full moon hangs, and the stars are dotted, which looks beautiful. Full of mystery. "You guys go back to rest, I'll go out and do something." Chris stopped practicing, looked at the girls and said, "It won't take too long this time, come back before 12 o'clock. As soon as the voice fell, before they could speak, they had already left. The girls just reacted, and seeing that Chris was gone, they shook their heads and smiled bitterly. This guy is so decisive that he can't wait for a second. Queen Sweetheart is angry and funny, she doesn't know what to say to Chris. Betty stood up and said indifferently, "The strong ones talk less and don't talk nonsense too much. Only the weak can talk a lot." Karina looked at them with a curious look on her pretty face. "What did our captain go for? Who knows? I know, it must be because of those 2 phone bugs." Perona floated in the air and said with a smile, "Didn't Chris say it? These 2 phone bugs have absolute anti-eavesdropping functions, and no one can eavesdrop on them. Even with the most advanced wiretapping phone bugs, it is impossible to eavesdrop on the conversation between these 2 phone bugs." "What did Chris say? By the way, there are only 2 phone bugs in the world, that's what he said." Leiju nodded, a sweet and gentle smile appeared on Qingguao Qingcheng's face. "These 2 phone bugs are really amazing. It can be said that the 2 of them are actually the king of anti-eavesdropping phone bugs. They are really powerful." Baccarat waved his hand, smiled and said, "Chris will tell us what we should know. Since he didn't say it, let's not ask any more questions or discuss this. Okay, let's go back to rest. Since Chris isn't here, it doesn't make sense to stay here. The girls chatted and laughed and walked to the door. North Sea, over a certain sea area. Chris took out the phone bug and dialed it. This is specifically to contact Lieutenant General Tautu. The person on the other side should be busy and didn't answer the phone right away. After 10 seconds, the phone was connected. It was inconvenient to answer just now. Chris, is something wrong? The two have already discussed it, and they will never contact unless there is something important. Avoid being eavesdropped by others. Chris said calmly, you find a safe place, let's talk. You come along the life card, and I'll be there waiting for you. Okay, let's chat later. Chris hung up, trying to keep the call to a minimum for safety. Ellipsis 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 ellipsis. The top of a tall building. Peach Rabbit stood by the railing, wrapped his arms in front of him, and looked up at the stars and the bright moon. She was wearing white jeans, white short sleeves, and white high heels. The breeze blowing, her hair fluttering, made her look particularly beautiful. Suddenly, with a bang, a figure fell onto the tall building. You're here, Chris. Tautu slowly turned around, her hands still clasped in front of her. A look of doubt appeared on her beautiful face. Is there anything important? I have to make a special trip. Chris wasn't surprised that Tautu didn't wear the white cloak of justice. After all, it's off-duty time. As a Navy, you have to have your own life and do what you love. It must be very inconvenient to wear Navy clothes every day. You take this. Chris threw a phone bug to Tautu and said calmly as always, I have 2 phone bugs in my hand, which can be completely anti-eavesdropping. When we talk on the phone in the future, we don't have to worry about being stolen by others. How about it, the Peach Rabbit in jeans and high heels, will it be very beautiful? Unfortunately, the author has no photos, or let you take a look at it. Everyone depends on your imagination. *. 054. Bring Tina into the camp too. What? Shock. Even if Teochigui is a general candidate and has a lot of knowledge, he has never heard of such a phone bug. Chris, are you sure you can completely prevent eavesdropping? Tautu looked at Chris with a surprised look on her pretty face. She couldn't believe it at all. Chris put his hands in his trouser pockets and said calmly, you can rest assured, there is absolutely no problem. As for why it is so certain, that is the memory of Chris' previous life. As a pirate fan, he knows too many things. However, these are not to be told to others, otherwise it will cause stormy waves. It's incredible. Tautu looked at the black phone bug and murmured, I didn't expect such a magical phone bug in the world. I'm really ignorant. Chris wasted no time and got into the subject. I'll talk about the situation on my side first. During this period of time, I have recruited a lot of subordinates, and my strength has been further improved. And the Chiwahai Alliance has entered the right track. Chris looked at Tautu and said lightly, Doflamingo and Boya, Hancock, both of whom have become members of the League. Tautu was stunned for a moment, a flash of light flashed in his mind, and he instantly understood something. Chris, Boya, Hancock's departure from Amazon, Lily, it's all because of you. Chris nodded and gave the answer. Her strength is indeed too weak. So, I suggest that she enter the New World, fight against powerful enemies, and quickly improve her strength. Fortunately, she wasn't a hopeless woman either, who finally set out on a journey to the Great Waterway. Tautu shook his head and said with a wry smile, the headquarters has discussed this matter, but we can't analyze the specific reason at all. I didn't expect that it was you who drove all this behind the scenes. It's incredible. But then again, your movements are very fast. I believe that in a short while, you will be able to become Chiwahai. Then, Chris will do more important things, such as cooperating with the Vinsmoke family to get the treasure map of the Great Pirate Locks. After listening to Chris's remarks, Tautu shook his head, with a look of emotion on his beautiful and delicate face. Your experience during this period is really too rich, and it can be written into a book for people to read. Compared to you, I find myself doing very poorly and making little progress. Looked at Chris and said with a wry smile, Sakazuki has no mission to go out, so he can only continue to wait. In terms of attracting subordinates, I have been in contact with Tina recently, and the probability of success is very high. Her strength is very good. If she can join our camp, the role she will play in the future will definitely be huge. Chris nodded and agreed. Colonel Tina, a person with the ability of the threshold fruit, the strength is indeed very good, and the potential is full. When you become a general in the future, and promote her, it will be more than enough to be a lieutenant general. Then, Tautu explained the situation on her side. The content of the two people's words is to pick the more important ones, and they don't say any nonsense. We can't talk too long, that's all. Chris looked at Tautu and said calmly, the interview will be cancelled in the future. If there is anything, please call me directly to be safe. Tautu nodded and agreed. The next time I contact you, I believe you are already Chiwahai, waiting for your good news. Go away. As soon as the voice fell, the figure disappeared in an instant, and there was no trace. Tautu didn't hesitate at all, jumped down, and left. North Sea, above a certain sea area. 11:30 in the evening. The moonlight is like water, falling from the sky, shrouding the Chris in it, like daytime. At this point, the crew members all returned to their rooms and went to bed early. With a bang, Chris suddenly appeared on the deck, not attracting the attention of the alarm officer. Chris is getting ready to take a step forward and keep practicing hard. But he suddenly found that there was a beautiful woman standing at the front of the deck. It was the gentle and dignified Reiju. After thinking for a while, Chris gave up his practice and walked directly to Reiju. This gentle and lovely beauty deserves his time and attention. If you don't see it, that's it. But since this situation is discovered, I have to say hello. She didn't know what Reiju was thinking, but she was so absorbed that she didn't even hear Chris' footsteps. What's the matter, not sleeping so late? Chris was calm as always and asked directly. This time, Reiju came back to her senses, and there was a panicked look on Chinguaoqingcheng's face. He stroked his fan-colored hair, turned around slowly, and said with an uncomfortable smile, I can't sleep, get up and look at the moon. Chris, did you just come back? Snapped. Chris and Reiju stood side by side, lit a cigarette, and said lightly, looking ahead, I just came back, and I saw you here, so I'll come and have a look. Tell me, is there something bothering you? Chris smokes, and Reiju knows it. It's just that he draws less often, so he doesn't see it many times, and he doesn't see it often. Not to mention, powerful men are so handsome no matter what they do. At this moment, in the moonlight, Chris looks like smoking. Really handsome. In addition, Chris, a cultivator madman, suddenly cared about himself and asked about his own situation. This made Reiju feel extremely moved. Looking at Chris, her beautiful eyes lit up with brilliance. The flawless face, with a faint smile on her face, looks really beautiful. Big guys, the above is the picture of Tina. I won't introduce too much about this one, and I will mention it again later. Also, the reason why I wrote about Reiju here is not for other reasons, the author really likes it. This gentle big sister, so I arranged this scene, asterisk. 055, Reiju, you just stay on the boat. It's nothing, just can't sleep, come out and get some air. Reiju put her hand on the railing, raised her head, looked at the vast night sky, and murmured, today's moonlight is really beautiful, it's fascinating. Chris took a breath, and shrugged his shoulders, yes, you're not my subordinate, I really can't control you. We are partners and we have to keep a little secret, totally understandable. Just now, how could Reiju's panicked expression hide from Chris's eyes? This made him very curious. Reiju must have encountered something and was upset, so he couldn't sleep at night. If it was another woman, Chris would just turn around and leave, not to mention pulling down. But for Leju, he was still very patient and willing to listen to her troubles. Hearing Chris say that, Reju panicked and explained quickly. "Why, I am also a member of this ship, not what you said." Leju rolled his eyes at him, and said angrily, "You bastard, you thought you only care about cultivation, and you don't understand the world at all. Now it seems that this strategy is played very smartly. I'm embarrassed if I don't say it." Chris exhaled the smoke from his mouth and looked at the jade man beside him with a rare faint smile. "Go ahead, I'm all ears." Leju stroked her hair, lowered her head slightly, and began to explain in detail. "The thing is, it has to start with Oliver. After we killed the white ghost pirates, I reported the situation." Leju raised her head slightly, glanced at Chris, then moved her gaze to the sea, and said a little embarrassedly, "After that, the father said a lot of things. Said that after you become Chihuahai, let the Vinsmoke family marry you. I won't say much about the rest. This is probably the case." Chris fell silent, finally understanding what was going on. He was not surprised by this. Jaji is too cold-blooded, as long as he can realize his lifelong wish, to dominate the North Sea. Then he can do anything, even if he sacrifices his children, he doesn't care. So it was actually quite normal for Leju to become a victim of the family. This is very unfair to Leju, but what can she do? Chris exhaled the smoke from his mouth, turned to look at Leju, and said with a serious face, "Your father is actually crazy. He can give everything for the hegemony of the North Sea. Now he sees my strength, chooses to cooperate with me, and places all his hopes on me. So, for his goals, he will definitely listen to me and support me unconditionally." Chris took a breath and said with relief, "Actually, you don't have to worry. After you become Shichibukai, I told him at that time and promised him that he would listen to me. To be honest, I think you are doing well now. Compared with Germa, there are friends who care here and there are all kinds of new things. Why do you think so much? Just stay here in peace, being happy is enough." Chris flicked the cigarette butt into the sea, shrugged his shoulders and said, "As long as Gage wants to dominate the North Sea, he will keep you here forever and won't let you go back to that cold place. Everything is so beautiful, I don't understand why on earth are you upset." It can be seen that Chris really cares about Leju. When did he say so much? Never had. Not for anything else, just because Leju is a really good woman, that's all. Realized. After listening to Chris' long speech, Reju's eyes became extremely bright. Suddenly, she understood everything. The troubles in my heart suddenly disappeared, leaving only a thick surprise. Looking at the eyes of the man next to him, with a certain kind of emotion, it is unclear, and very complicated. In the end, it turned into a sweet smile, and said with curved eyebrows, "Chris, I'm a little sleepy all of a sudden, go back to rest first. You also rest early, don't keep cultivating so late, you know." Hearing Reju's happy tone, Chris knew that her troubles had completely disappeared, and her good mood had returned. "It's too early to fall asleep. After practicing for a while, I also fell asleep. Okay, staying up late is a woman's natural enemy, hurry up and rest." Leju looked at Chris, blinked her beautiful eyes, and her face was full of happiness. "Then I'm going to bed, good night . After speaking, she walked towards her room with brisk steps, which showed how good she was. Chris looked at her back, stared silently for a while, and then walked directly to the training room. 4 days later. Report. Tell everyone good news, let's enter the East China Sea. Tell everyone. The alarm sound came from the observation deck, the volume was very loud, and the tone was very excited and very happy. Needless to say, the alerter also knew that this was the last sea area, and when the East China Sea voyage was over, they would enter the most mysterious sea area. Great Fairway. Hearing this good news, the whole crew boiled and shouted desperately. Wow, finally arrived at the last sea area. I'm so happy, I'm so excited that I want to hit someone. Who told me to punch him? Fuck off, won't you punch yourself in the face? Oops, I'm so happy, I can't do it, I'm going to let the water go first. Don't talk nonsense, jump up and twist it for Lao Su. I want to say, can you please stop pushing me, fuck. 056, the good luck this time turned out to be in the sky. The last sea area, go to the Great Waterway when it is complete, way ha 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 ha. Basas raised his arms high, his face full of excitement, and he laughed. Poison Q showed a weird smile and said, wait for this day, I've been waiting for a long time, it's finally here, hee hee hee. Luo held the demon knife and cried, looking at this blue sea, still so cold. This is the East China Sea, the weakest sea area in the 4 seas. Hawkins said in a low voice, it's impossible to meet a stronger pirate here. Lafitte stopped practicing and looked very polite. I hope that if I am here, I can add a new person, so that the order of the squad leader can be determined. Seriously, I'm curious about this fight. Inside the training room. Listening to the roar from outside, Queen Sweetheart shook her head and said with emotion, it seems that everyone is very excited and really wants to enter the Great Waterway as soon as possible. Betty took a breath, still so calm and calm, the 4 seas are too weak and not exciting enough, of course everyone wants to go to the Great Waterway for adventure. I'm so excited too. Karina's beautiful eyes were bright and she said with a smile, the new world is on the Great Waterway. If we enter there, we can find treasures. The treasure of the great pirates of rocks, every time I think of this, I can't be more excited. Perona nodded again and again, her little face full of interest. I'm looking forward to it too. I really want to see what treasures are in it. This princess likes adventure the most, Haley ha 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 tilde tilde. Leiju placed the newspaper lightly on the table, looked at Baccarat, smiled and said, Boya, Hancock is really amazing, and now he is really famous all over the world. Baccarat folded her crimson hair, nodded, and said something with a smile. Before beheading pirates with a bounty of more than 80 million, now she has solved a few of the prisoners with a bounty of more than 100 million. Now, her fame is definitely booming, and it will attract the attention of more and more powerful people. Baccarat shook his head and said affirmatively, if she looks average, that's fine. But if she's so beautiful, it's dangerous. Chris said that she is the bottom group of Chihuahua, and her strength is not that strong. So, the next voyage, she must not be so smooth. The sweetheart queen looked at Baccarat, blinked, and smiled. What you say has the most weight. That is to say, this Boya, Hancock will definitely encounter trouble next, which is inevitable. Karina looked at them with a puzzled look on her pretty face, and asked, if that's the case, why doesn't Chris care? It seems like he doesn't care. Betty spit out the smoke from her mouth and said casually, if she is killed so easily, it only means that she is not powerful enough. Chris said that, how could he possibly care? Of course, if Boya, Hancock called for help, that's another story. Leiju touched her delicate chin and said something with a smile. After all, she is Chihuahua, so she won't be so unbearable, at most she will encounter some difficulties. Suddenly, Baccarat frowned her beautiful eyebrows, and her beautiful face showed a confused expression. What's wrong? Several women noticed her strangeness and hurriedly asked. Baccarat shook his head slightly, still frowning, and said with a puzzled face, I don't know what happened, but I always feel that good luck has appeared. But if you feel it carefully, there is nothing, it's really strange. The girls looked at each other, not knowing what was going on. Karina shrugged her shoulders and said with a smile, anyway, Sister Baccarat's feeling is definitely not wrong. Well, let's talk to Chris and see what he does. The sweetheart queen nodded and agreed, Baccarat's intuition is indeed too accurate, there can be no mistake. Betty took a breath, looked at the figure in front of her, and said lightly, Chris, stop for a while, Baccarat found something unusual. Chris didn't stop swinging his sword, didn't even turn his head, and threw out a sentence intuitively. What did you find? The girls were helpless, and when they met such a cultivator, they couldn't say anything more. Baccarat stroked her crimson hair, looked at the figure in front, and said with a slight smile, "Chris, I feel like good luck is coming. However, I'm not so sure about the intuition this time. Such a situation has never been encountered before." This time, Chris stopped practicing, stood quietly, and slowly closed his eyes. Looking at Chris's strange behavior, Karina was afraid of disturbing him and asked in a low voice, "What is Chris doing, thinking about something?" "No, this is Chris's arrogance when he is outside." Queen Sweetheart also explained in a very low voice, "Chris's ability is very strong, and he can feel a long distance. Well, it's not clear how far it is, but it's far, far away." Perona floated in the air, looked at Chris with envy in her eyes, and murmured, "This ability is very useful, but unfortunately this princess has never been able to learn it." At this time, Chris slowly opened his eyes, looked at Baccarat, and said calmly, "There is an endless sea around, no islands and no ships." Hearing him say this, the girls were really puzzled and couldn't understand at all. Betty frowned her beautiful Louis eyebrows and said in disbelief, "Could it be that Baccarat's intuition is wrong? It shouldn't be possible." The Sweetheart Queen shook her head, also disbelieving, "From so many experiences, it is impossible for Baccarat's intuition to be wrong." "What's the matter?" Karina looked out the window at the sea, eager to find out. Reju and Baccarat shook their heads, unable to figure out why. Chris looked up at the sky outside the window and said in a very certain tone, "There is only one possibility, in the sky. 057, let the golden lion, the remnant of the old era, come to an end. In the sky." Hearing what Chris said, the girls all looked out the window in unison. "I saw blue sky and white clouds, the sun was shining brightly, and the weather was very sunny. Is this what is called good luck? Have you found anything? How can I see it? There are only blue sky and white clouds." Karina stood in front of the window, Menu stared hard at the sky, but couldn't see anything at all. The Queen Sweetheart shook her head and said with a wry smile, "If I can find anything, I will see the white clouds fluttering." Betty frowned her beautiful willow leaf eyebrows and took a breath, "I really don't understand what good luck can have in the sky." "Chris, did you find something?" Lei Juyu held her white chin in her hands, and looked at Chris with her beautiful eyes, with a shallow smile on her dignified and elegant face. Chris withdrew his gaze, waved blood red, and said calmly, "Golden Lion Shiki, I don't know if you have heard of it." "You said him, heard it, this is a big man." Karina reacted instantly, her beautiful eyes lit up, and she said in disbelief, "Chris, you mean, the golden lion is in the sky?" Betty leaned on the chair and crossed Erlang's legs. "Everyone must know the great pirates of the same era as Roger. It's true to know, but how is he in the sky?" The Queen Sweetheart frowned, her pretty face was full of doubts, she couldn't understand. Chris was patient and explained in detail. Golden Lion Shiki, a Superman who has the ability of fluttering fruit, can make himself and objects fly in the air. 20 years ago, a battle broke out with Roger, the Pirate King, in the waters of 8 Wall, and the Roger pirates were almost wiped out. After that, I heard that Roger, the Pirate King, was arrested, and he went into the Navy headquarters single-handedly, and was finally locked in the Advanced City. However, this guy was a ruthless man, cut off his feet, escaped from the Advanced City, and disappeared since then. Chris continued to wave his sword and said calmly, "The Navy has been tracking him down, but he didn't expect to be hiding in the sky over the East China Sea. No wonder he hasn't been discovered." Silence. Hearing what Chris said, the girls suddenly quieted down. They have all heard of Golden Lion Shiki to a greater or lesser extent, but they don't know much about him at all. At this moment, the girls knew that this guy was much, much more powerful than they thought. "It's really amazing." Karina looked at the sky outside the window, with admiration in her beautiful eyes, and said with emotion, "I almost wiped out Roger, the Pirate King, how strong he must be." The Queen Sweetheart shook her head and couldn't believe it. The key is to escape from the advancing city. This is too scary. He must have been the first to get out of there, and no one has ever been able to do that. Perona danced in the air, her pretty face was full of interest, and she said happily, "That's great, great. He can also fly in the sky, and he can make things float. It's so interesting, ha 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 ha." Betty put her arms around her, exhaled the smoke from her mouth, and asked, "Chris, since we've found the trail of this big man, shouldn't we do something?" Leju blinked her beautiful eyes, smiled and said, "Chris has always liked cooperation the most, so why didn't he take action this time?" Chris gave the answer directly, "This person, he has been abolished." After cutting off his feet, he used the famous swords, Sakura Ten, and Muku, as prosthetic limbs. Now, his strength has been greatly reduced, and he no longer has the domineering and bravery that roars around the world and swallows the world. This remnant of the old era should also let him come to an end. Chris put away the blood red and said calmly, "After a while, Lafitte and the others have become stronger, which is just right for them to practice their hands. This guy used to be a big pirate, and he must have a devil fruit in his hand. Even if it is an illusion, he must have it." What Chris said, although the tone was very calm, still made the girls feel extremely shocked. This is to hunt the big pirate golden lion. To challenge the former maritime hegemony. I found that Chris has such a big heart. Karina shrugged her shoulders and said with great emotion, "That's the man who dominates the sea. Even if he breaks his feet now, he must be very powerful. It's shocking that Chris is going to challenge him." Perona was flying in the air and said with a smile, "Since Chris said so, then there must be no problem. I really want to fight now. I really want to see what the golden lion looks like. Is it really like a lion? Haley 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 tilde tilde." Queen Sweetheart folded her pale blonde hair and said with certainty, "Although Chris is young, he belongs to the younger generation. But the strength is definitely stronger than the golden lion. This is a battle without suspense." Betty took a breath, still indifferent. "I'm curious how many devil fruits the golden lion will have. His collection must be very rich." Leju looked at Baccarat, raised her eyebrows and said with a gentle smile, "Your intuition is really too sensitive. Even at such a high place, you can feel it, it's really amazing." Baccarat picked up the newspaper and said with a smile, "I can only say that we are lucky. I couldn't have felt it without passing under him. Maybe it's fate. This former maritime hegemon is destined to be terminated by 058. The strongest navigator, Nami appears. 3 days later. East China Sea, Sea Restaurant Bharati. At this time, there were many people coming and going in the restaurant, and there were a lot of customers. As expected of the most famous restaurant in Donghai, the taste is really delicious. Quote. "That's for sure. Not only is the environment good here, but the owner is also very enthusiastic. It's like a fairyland. Wow wow wow. It's so delicious. Let's have another one. I'm going to have a big meal today, ha ha ha. This place is really good. Not only delicious food, but also a lot of beautiful women. I like it so much." At this moment, a scream rang out. "It's not good. The big thing is bad. There are many pirate ships coming." Hearing the exclamation, the guests in the restaurant were stunned for a while, and quickly looked outside. I saw a big boat in front, and dozens of small boats behind it, driving towards this side in a mighty manner. Full of momentum, very scary. "It's over, it's Admiral Crick's pirate group, it's over." "Admiral Crick, who is that? Does he dare to mess around here?" "You don't know, this is the largest pirate group in the East China Sea, and Captain Click offers a bounty of 17 million Baileys." 17 million, oh my god. It is said that there are several thousand crew members, and we are really finished now, woo woo woo. At this moment, a thumping sound came over. Jep looked at the guests and said calmly, "Even if you eat openly, with the old man here, these bastards won't dare to mess around." Patty was carrying a big fork with a fierce look on his face. Our restaurant is not only for eating, if anyone dares to provoke us, hee hee. Carney held a kitchen knife, nodded, and said with a sneer, Balati is a fighting restaurant, not afraid of anyone. Dear guests, you can enjoy the food as much as you can. With me here, everyone's safety will not be a problem. With a cigarette in his mouth, Sanji said politely to the guests. Suddenly, a guest shouted. Oops! Everyone, look, what a big ship! Hearing the sound, not only the guests, but also the cooks on board, all looked over. Seeing this, everyone was shocked. There was a look of horror on their faces. What a big ship, this is too scary. I've grown so big and I've never seen such a huge ship, it's unbelievable, it's unbelievable. Which pirate group is this, even bigger than Crick's ship? Isn't the overlord of the East China Sea the Crick pirates? This ship is not from the East China Sea. Everyone, stop discussing this, what should we do now, woo woo? Patty looked at the huge ship and said with a look of surprise, this motherfucker is too big, I'm afraid we can't do it. Carney's hand holding the kitchen knife trembled slightly, with a look of fear on her face. For such a large ship, the combat power must be very strong, and we must not be able to stop it. Sanji spit out the smoke from his mouth, looked at Zap, and said solemnly, Old man, the other party seems to be very big, what should I do? Zap glared at them and said angrily, What are you afraid of? This is not a ship from the East China Sea, it must have happened to pass by. I heard about Barati's reputation, so I stopped by to eat here. I need to say that. At this moment, in the restaurant, a beautiful girl with short orange hair stood in front of the window and silently looked at the big ship in front of her. She is the beauty from Kokoja village, Nami. Such a large ship, if it will sneak up, it will definitely be able to steal a lot of treasure. Nami's eyes were sparkling, her pretty face was full of anticipation, and she was very excited. She knew very well that she had finally caught a big fish. As long as you snatch the treasure of this ship, you can collect 100 million Bailey, and then you can rescue the villagers. Derry Dornold, on the Sabaru. Captain Crick, that ship is too big, what shall we do? We are the overlords of the East China Sea, what are we afraid of? We are done. The captain is invincible in the world, whoever dares to provoke us can just destroy it. But this ship is so big, can we beat it? Nonsense, we have so many people and so many ships, how can we not do it? Don't think about it, let's fight, Captain. Crick is an extremely arrogant guy, and he said arrogantly, Little ones, what are you afraid of, what are you talking about? I am the strongest pirate in the world, the #1 in the world. The other party's ship is very big, so what, just grab it, ha ha ha. Immediately afterwards, with a big wave of his hand, he said viciously, hit me, and snatch all their treasures, quack tilde. Yes, Captain Crick. The people below echoed and hurriedly got busy, preparing to launch an attack. Chris, above deck. Special Mother, why do I feel that the pirate group seems to be attacking us? Bossos looked ahead and cursed angrily. Poison Q squinted his eyes slightly, with a strange smile on his vicissitudes face, coughed and said, this time there are a bit more people. I can kill it. Lafitte turned his cane, still looking like a gentleman, and said something. It's not like, the other party really wants to attack. Luo carrying the demon knife and crying coldly, said coldly, guys who are over their own strength, they are courting death, and no one can save them. Hawkins, as always dead, said in a low voice, the fate has been doomed since they appeared in front of us. 059. New crew, Ghost Akin. At this moment, there was a sound of footsteps. This pirate group looks really mighty. There must be dozens of ships. Karina looked at the sea in front of her, her beautiful eyes lit up, a sweet smile bloomed on her pretty face, and her voice was still so pleasant. Perona floated in the air and said with a smile, but they will soon disappear. All the pirates who appear in front of us have the same fate. Betty spit out the smoke in her mouth and said lightly, "This time, we will definitely be wanted by the Navy, there is no doubt about that." "Yeah, last time I dealt with Oliver, the overlord of the North Sea, but no one knew about it at all." Sweetheart Queen nodded and said in agreement, "This time is different. With so many people watching, the news will definitely reach the Navy. Seriously, I'm looking forward to it. I don't know what our first reward will be." Leju tucked her hair together, smiled softly, and was generous. "Chris doesn't make a move. The Navy has no way of knowing our strength. It is estimated that we will just offer a reward, which is not high." Seeing Chris and the others coming over, Basas quickly laughed and said a quick sentence. "Captain, how are you? Do you want to fight?" Poison Q smiled mysteriously and said, "It seems that I have good luck again, this time it must be a newcomer." Lafitte looked at the pirate ship that was getting closer, turned his cane, and said politely, "The opposite side is preparing cannonballs, the muzzle is lowered, and an attack is about to be launched." Chris put his hands in his trouser pockets, stopped and stood, and said calmly, "In 3 minutes, you can kill as many as you can." Luo nodded, "Still so cold, thousands of people, there is no way to kill them, but on the main ship, definitely not one can be spared." Poison Q's vicissitudes of life showed a sinister smile, coughed and said, "Even if you can't kill it, you have to kill it happily. I want to poison them one by one and let them feel the charm of my asthma." Lafitte turned his cane and said gently, "If that's the case, let's get started." Next, it is destined to be a battle without suspense. Inside the Bharati restaurant. Oops, the two pirate groups are fighting. It's too strong. Where did this pirate group come from? The difference in strength between the two sides is too great. The Crick pirates are the overlords of the East China Sea. Look at them. They all fell down one by one. They are dead and dead. Mom, where is this fight? It's just a one-sided killing. It's definitely not from the East China Sea. It's definitely from somewhere else. It's too strong, it's really too powerful. S eyes widened, and he stared blankly at the Derry du Nord, Sabaru, where the battle was going on. What kind of strength is this? It's so terrifying, it's going to scare people to death. Carney shook his head and said with emotion, "Now, the East China Sea overlord, the Click Pirates, has become history." Sanji looked at Zap with a worried look on his face. "Old man, what should we do if we want to ruin the game?" Zap couldn't keep his calm any longer, frowned and said, "At that time, I have to beg for mercy, there is no other good way. No, this group of people is too terrifying." Seeing the situation of the Chris pirates, Nami instantly changed her decision and thought to herself, I'll sneak into the Crick ship later, there must be a lot of treasure there too. Well, it's safer this way, that's it. At a certain window, a man watched the battle, his dark face showing excitement. This man has dark skin and looks a little ugly. It is the one who has the title of Ghost Man, Jin. It's too strong, this is the fleet I'm looking forward to. I want to get on this pirate ship, I must keep up with them. Akin swears in his heart that no matter what, he must join the Chris pirates. Derry Dornold, on the Sabaru. At this point, the battle was drawing to a close. On the main ship, only 2 people were killed. Admiral Crick, and Flame Baru. Who are you? Who are you? Admiral Click was lying on the deck, his hand quietly touched his stomach, ready to take out the hidden pistol. Bang! Bashes stepped on his head and said viciously, "You want to play ass, what rubbish." After Lafayette solved Baloo, he smiled warmly. The pirates here in the East China Sea are short-sighted and have a very weak fighting consciousness. The main reason is that we are too strong. Hawkins said deadly. Poison Q recovered his miasma, looked at the pirate ships fleeing everywhere, and said with a pity, "These people, their ability to escape is too strong, there is no way to kill them. I wanted to poison them all to death, but one by one found that something was wrong, so they just sailed away." Luo carried the ghost crying, with a cold look, "The others are all little ones, and they don't have any combat power at all, so there's no need to pay attention to them. Inside the Bharati restaurant. Seeing such a shocking scene outside, everyone was stunned. Admiral Crick, is that the end? Terror, there are such powerful pirates in this world. It's over, they sailed over, what should we do? I don't want to die, I have an 80-year-old mother at home, and a son who is waiting to be fed, woo-woo. Seeing the panicked expressions of the guests, Patty didn't bother to pay attention to it, and said nervously, what should we do? Do we have to run for our lives? Carney sweated coldly on his forehead, and was extremely frightened. I don't know, anyway, I absolutely can't fight, or I will die. What nonsense, just go out and entertain. Without saying a word, Jep walked directly to the door and solemnly welcomed the arrival of the Chris pirates. If you are afraid of death, you don't have to come. Sanji put his hands in his trouser pockets, dipped a cigarette, and followed him out. Guys, the above is the picture of Ah-Jin. Do you still have any impressions of this guy? Also, next, Reiju will meet with Sanji. What will the two of them say? I'm looking forward to it. Yo, asterisk. 060, Reiju and Sanji meet. Above Chris. A lot of people have escaped. Queen Sweetheart looked at the sea in the distance, and saw that many boats were fleeing for their lives, and the speed was astonishing. Betty took a breath and said lightly, my lady probably calculated, this time I killed a third of them. The rest is not important. I'll go clean the battlefield first and see what treasures there are. Karina blinked her beautiful eyes, her pretty face was full of excitement, and she liked to snatch treasure the most. Perona floated in the air and said with a smile, I'm going too, they have so many ships, there must be some good things, ha 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 ha. Leiju shook her head lightly, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, these two people just can't sit still. At this time, Chris made a sound and said calmly, let's go. Take the lead and jump directly to the top of Bharati. The others didn't say much, and followed Chris one by one. Welcome to Bharati Restaurant at Sea. Quote. Seeing Chris and the others appearing, Jep hurriedly welcomed him warmly without saying a word. Welcome, welcome. Patty and other chefs quickly joined in. Sanji was about to welcome him, but he was stunned, and the smoke fell on the deck. Reiju. In the same way, after Leiju saw him, her beautiful eyes lit up, and her face was full of shock. Sanji. Except for Chris, the people on both sides were very puzzled. Did you meet an acquaintance? In an instant, Patty and the other chefs felt very happy, and now they are not afraid, it must be fine. Queen Sweetheart looked at Sanji, and then at Leiju, her beautiful eyes were shining, she understood what was going on. Leiju, he is from your family, right? His eyebrows are very similar, but they are all different. Betty nodded and said, it's very similar, they are all curled eyebrows, it's not relatives who can't tell. Chris ignored this at all and walked directly into the restaurant. You guys go first, I'll come over later. Leiju said something to Bakura and the others, then turned to look at Sanji, smiled and said, let's chat on the side. After he finished speaking, he walked towards the corner with graceful and noble steps. What are you still doing? Hurry up, bastard Sanji. Patty waited for the cook and hurriedly cursed at him. Zap glanced at Sanji and said solemnly, boy, you must be gentle with women, you know. Okay, Rory is rambling. Sanji lit a cigarette and walked directly to the side. Inside the restaurant. When everyone saw Chris walk in, they all fell silent, and no one dared to speak. Seeing the appearance of the guests, Basas was very proud, raised his arms, laughed and said, Captain, everyone is afraid of us, way ha 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 ha. No way, we are pirates, hee 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 tilde tilde. Poison Q showed a weird smile and glanced around, as if looking for prey. Hawkins said in a dead voice, I just killed so many people, how could everyone not be afraid? Queen Sweetheart looked around and said with a smile, there are a lot of guests here, the food must be delicious. Betty shrugged her shoulders and said lightly, I'll know if I try it later. At this moment, Chris stopped and wrapped his arms around him, still so calm. I'm the captain of the Chris Pirates, Chris. If you want to join us, you can come and sign up. After speaking, go directly to an empty table on the left. Lafitte turned his cane, looked around, and said with a slight smile, the captain must have found a good seedling. Who could it be? Luo nodded and agreed, the captain can't say this for no reason, it's inevitable. The potential that can make the captain look good must be very good. Hawkins' voice was still low, extremely calm. Bassos glanced around, laughed and said, if you want to join, then hurry up, don't be mother-in-law, way ha 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 ha. The guests looked at each other, completely confused. It's good, the ghost is willing to be a pirate. But these words, they certainly did not dare to say, one by one kept silent. Everyone secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that this group of people will not mess up, not such a vicious pirate. It seems to be all right, hurry up to get food and entertain the distinguished guests. Patty and the other cooks, without a word, rushed into the kitchen and got busy. When did such a powerful young man appear in the ocean? It's really scary. Zap glanced in Chris's direction and sighed inwardly. He is not an uninformed cook. He once entered the Great Waterway, and survived in it for a year, and finally retreated completely. He could feel that the strength of this young man was very terrifying. It is definitely the strongest of all the people he has ever seen, no one. Suddenly, a voice rang out. Captain Chris, I'd like to join you, may I? Hearing the sound, the guests were stunned for a moment and looked over quickly. Does anyone really want to join? This must be incredible. Chris leaned on the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, and looked down at the menu on the table slightly, as if he didn't hear the person's voice. As for Lafitte and the others, it's different, they all looked at them.